Hello, my name is Martin Lakeus. I'm a researcher at Chalmers University of Technology. This video is about collecting scientific data with LoopMe, which is a new type of scientific social media tool. I will talk about this through an example case, how we are going to use scientific social media at Corporate Entrepreneurship Track at Chalmers, which is a master program where we send out students to do real-life, action-oriented corporate entrepreneurship projects at partner corporations around Sweden. So welcome. Here's the agenda for the presentation. First, I will talk about what LoopMe is and what scientific social media is. Then I will talk about the example case using LoopMe at the Corporate Entrepreneurship Track here at Chalmers in the coming academic year 2019 to 2020. And then in the last section I will talk about the results that we expect to get from this in the end. Let's get started. Part 1. What is LoopMe and scientific social media? LoopMe is an IT tool that looks a little bit like this. It can be used on a web. It can be used on a tablet or on a smartphone. It can be downloaded as an app or it can be accessed through a website. But what does it do? Well, when we enter the website loopme.io, we learn there that LoopMe is a tool for leading and following learning and development. And it makes action-based development processes more clear, more honest, more trust-based and more visible. It can be used for action-based education, which is Corporate Entrepreneurship Track is an example of that. It can be used for leadership, which is basically corporate entrepreneurship is a specific type of leadership. And it can also be used for research and evaluation purposes. When we use LoopMe at Corporate Entrepreneurship Track, we basically use LoopMe for all these three purposes at the same time. LoopMe is an example of a scientific social media platform. And what is that? Well, it's a social media platform that is optimized for social science and used primarily for data collection and analysis. This definition is taken from an article that I've been writing that is soon to be published in a book about research on entrepreneurship by William Gartner and Bruce Teague. Scientific social media is an alternative to other ways of collecting data, such as interviews and surveys. And this shows a little table comparing the three different data collection methods. Interviews is good for when we have small number of participants. We can explore complex issues, and interviews can actually be quite valuable for participants. Surveys are better for a really large number of participants, and the data can be quantified, and it's very affordable. Scientific social media comes somewhere in between and manages to combine the benefits of interviews with the benefits of surveys. It's used mostly around Sweden by more or less 15,000 users. The company behind LoopMe is called Me Analytics AB. It's a small, research-intensive IT spin-out from research at Chalmers. It was started in 2014. It's got 5 employees. It's got about 60 customers using this. And this little company develops and offers the IT tool LoopMe. LoopMe works as a system like this. First, you choose a number of different tasks that are within a certain development area, and then you give this to a number of people, and then you can follow these people when they do the tasks, and it becomes like a social relation between a leader of some kind and the followers. And then you can capture the decisive moments for people doing different development tasks. And as a leader of it, you get a manageable flow about what is going on. And then afterwards, you can analyze what happened, and you can see the learning and personal development that happened. So you have an input in terms of tasks, you have a process in terms of people doing a lot of different things in real life, and then you have an output in terms of data on which impact different tasks or projects had according to the people who were working with it. Here I will tell you a little bit about the basics around LoopMe. How does LoopMe work? Because then it becomes easier to understand how we are going to use LoopMe at the Corporate Entrepreneurship Track as a research tool. LoopMe contains of loops, groups, tasks, and tags. And first we will talk about what is a loop. A loop is a message with some free text, with the possibility to attach a file or a photo, with the possibility to choose an emotional icon, and with the possibility to attach one or more tags, which could be something that illustrates what has happened. A report is something a little bit more comprehensive. Here you see an example of a task to run a store that is for a student who is going to learn how to run a store. Then that student has been running a store, and then the student does a reflection around how it was to run a store, how the feeling was, and what the student got to do, and how it felt. And as you see here, it's a loop, but it's also a report at the same time. It has free text, it has an icon of emotionality, and it has one or more tags. And as a student, you can then see the progress. How many times have you done a particular thing that you are supposed to do? When a teacher or a leader of some kind then gets this kind of reports from different people, it becomes a social flow where you as a leader can follow the different people who have been doing stuff. And you can see how they are reflected upon it. And you can also go in and comment on it in real time. And you can see the emotional levels. As you see here, here's an icon of a negative emotion. Here's an icon of a positive emotion. Here's a reflection based on a task that was to reflect upon a critical emotional event. And here's a comment back by the leader. In this case, it's me in my role as a teacher. And here are some tags. Expected a different outcome, becoming more resilient, becoming more creative, and so on. There are a number of different types of groups in LoopMe. The first type is a flat group with one role type. Everybody sees everything. It's not used so much in LoopMe because it simply becomes a lot of communication if we have a flat group. Then we have a hierarchical group. That's the second type of group, where, for example, teacher gets reports or loops from the students, and it's only the teachers who can see what the students write. So it becomes more like a trustful dialogue. And then we have a third type of group. It's a hierarchical group, but with also a third role type, which is basically a follower. It can, for example, be a supervisor at a company. For example, if you're a corporate entrepreneurship student, your supervisor at the company can follow your development at the same time as the teacher is following your development and activities. Then we have tasks and tags. Tasks and tags, they build on something that is called constructive alignment principles, and I will soon try to explain what that means. The first thing is to specify some task. It can be what people need to do in order to reach some kind of a learning or development outcome. In the example here, it's a task from a school where a student is asked to write a debate article and send it to a magazine, because that could be something that you can learn a lot from. And then we can see here the reflection from the student. We sent it to our local newspaper, but the editor didn't understand, so she wanted us to rewrite it. And then what people do then is the student reflects upon this experience, and it was very negative because the editor didn't understand. And then you tag your experience. Writing correct language maybe was something you learned, practicing rhetorics, producing text, applying knowledge, cooperated outside school, and so on. So first you specify a task, then you let people do the task, and then they must reflect upon each task and connect this to relevant learning and development outcomes. And then the tags are the learning or development outcomes that people are supposed to or hoping to reach by doing this task up here. That's how it works. This is the most basic aspects of LoopMe. So we have a treatment that some kind of a leader prescribes. We have people's resulting activities and thoughts and the reflections around it. And we have tags, which are basically the leader's ideas on what effects or impacts that could happen. So these texts are predetermined by the leader, in this case the teacher, and then the student, in this case can choose among different tags. Which ones did I think were correct based on what I had experienced? So as you see, this becomes data up here, it's qualitative data. Down here we have quantitative data. Also the emotionality is also quantitative data. And what we want to have here is good alignment between these three things. The treatment should result in some kind of an activity, and then we should try to be able to capture the effects or the impact. So these three, they go together. LoopMe is basically a way to try to find causation, which is basically the relationship between cause and effect. Here to the left you have an example. Let's say that we have a dry, hot and sunny summer weather. And then two things can happen. People eat a lot of ice cream and people get sunburned. We will typically have correlation between people eating ice cream and people catching sunburn. But it's not causation. It's not because people eat ice cream that they become sunburned. Instead, both these two things are caused by the sun. There we have causation. So statistics and surveys are often used to capture correlation, but LoopMe is rather used to capture what is called causation. Another example is here. Let's say that 100% of people who breathe die. That is correlation. It's not because they breathe that they die. They die because they are humans, and humans always die sooner or later. And then we have the next statement. 100% of people who don't breathe die. Well, then the fact that they stopped breathing is the reason why they die. There we are talking about causation. So what LoopMe does is to show the relationship between some cause and some effect. And that means that instead of looking at on a macro level, where we maybe have statistical correlation between some kind of an intervention and an outcome, we go down here to look on the micro level, where specific events lead to specific other events, which in turn lead to macro level effects. And what LoopMe does is it can show what is going on in something that we often call a black box of unknown internal machinery. On a micro level, what causes things to happen are, for example, structures, context, psychological factors. This is very complex on a micro level, why things happen. And then if we give people a task, that could be seen as something that is happening on a macro level. And then we have the tags that are down here. They can capture what is going on a micro level. And then we get a better understanding of why things happen. And this is called causal mechanisms. The mechanisms that cause something to happen. When a mechanism-based explanation opens the black box, it discloses the structure. It turns the black box into a transparent box and makes visible how the participating entities and their properties, activities and relations produce the effect of interest. So we can use LoopMe to find out what is going on in corporate entrepreneurship on a micro level. That is what we're going to do at the Corporate Entrepreneurship Track here at Chalmers. Here are some examples. So how we use LoopMe is to put the causes we want to look at, we put them as tasks. And then we have an hypothesis around what effects these causes will lead to. And then we put the effects as tags in LoopMe. So for example, here we can put a cause, study hard, And then we have some indicators of success or failure, motivated or exhausted. And then we get the effect, good grades. Another event could be to start a venture, and then you could be excited, but you might also be stressed out. But the long-term effect could be that you become more entrepreneurial through learning by doing. Here's a task that I always give to my students at the School of Entrepreneurship. They need to make cold calls to people they don't know. And that makes them scared, and it also makes them feel that, oh, I dared to do this. And then they become better at sales, and so on. Here's an example from 2 tasks. Conduct 5 successful cold calls related to your project. And what effect does that give? Well, they increase their social skills, they communicate more effectively, they increase their customer understanding, they also get out of their comfort zone, and they become more self-aware. And this is real data from students at Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship. Another task here is where we ask them to reflect upon their critical emotional events related to their venture project. And then we get effects out of, maybe not out of the reflection, but out of those critical emotional events. The most common is actually that they expected a different outcome. But they also become more able to cope with uncertainty when they have these critical events. So here is something, here we can learn about why things happen, the causation around things. If you want to learn more about how LoopMe works for research, I've written so far 5 articles about this. If you want to see how I presented the LoopMe method, you can go to the method section in these articles. If you want to learn more about how to design tasks and tags, there is a 30-minute video on how to design tasks and tags in LoopMe that I really recommend you to watch. You have the link there, and I will put the link also in the comment section under this video so that you can just press that link. It contains 3 parts. First part is about how to think when designing tasks and tags. The second part is how to craft tasks that trigger deep reflection. And the third part is how to craft tags to associate to your tasks. Part 2. Example case, how will we use LoopMe at Corporate Track in the coming academic year? Corporate Entrepreneurship Track is an education program at Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship, where students get to do 100% real intrapreneurship. For 1.5 years, a team of driven students take on an innovative early stage idea in an existing corporation. They get the challenge to drive this initiative forward and try to create some innovative value for the corporation. So this is how this 1.5 year looks like. First, there is an idea evaluation phase where a process is conducted looking at potential innovations in the corporation, applying different tools such as intellectual property rights analysis, risk analysis, scenario planning, verification, financing, and so on. In the second term, it's about venture creation, to take this innovative idea from idea stage to realization. And this process is supported by feedback loops, reviews, coaching, peer learning, pilots, etc. And then in the last semester, it's about realization, going from creation to more realization. And that's a continuation of the autumn term with validation, verification, testing business hypothesis, and so on, and scaling the project to gain traction within the company. We have had many different partners so far. We've been doing this for 6 years now already, and it's been a very interesting journey. We have been doing research on this entire process for 5 years, and there are a number of summary articles by students where insights and learnings have been summarized class by class, as you can see here. There are a lot of different authors in these papers, and that's because it's a class summary. These papers can be downloaded at the link that you see there. There is also summaries or research papers written by faculty members. For example, this paper here by Tobias Fredberg and Johanna Pregmark, where overall insights are summarized, which I really can recommend. But this year, in 2019, we have a new thing that we are going to try in this research endeavor, and that is to use scientific social media as the standard method So we have 6 teams this year, and they are going to use LoopMe to collect longitudinal, hypothesis-based reflection data over a period of 6 months. And they are going to do this around 5 different research questions related to corporate entrepreneurship. And these research questions, they cover themes such as sales, strategy, organization, finance, and leadership in relation to corporate entrepreneurship. And we're going to get a lot of reflections through this, and they are all individual, they are not team-based, because experience, it's unique for each individual. So with 5 research questions, with between 3 and 5 hypotheses for each research question, and with these 12 students, we're going to get around maybe 180 to 300 different reflections on how corporate entrepreneurship worked in practice from 5 different perspectives. And this data is then going to be analyzed and compiled into 6 different team-based research articles based on 30 to 50 reflections each, and 5 cross-comparison research articles, which are then based on 42 to 70 reflections. I will soon show how this fits together. Previous years we've been working with interviews, but this replaces interviews for this year. And all data instead comes from these action-based reflections made by the students in the class, based on their unique real-world experiences about what works, how it works, and why. So this is how it all fits together, the overall reflection structure. On the left-hand side here, you see the 6 different teams that are embedded in 6 different corporations around Sweden. And on this axis here, we see 5 different research questions in sales, strategy, organization, finance, and leadership. And in each of these cells here, you're going to get about between 6 and 10 reflections. So we're going to get between 36 and 60 reflections on sales, the same amount of reflections on strategy, and so on. And we're going to have between 30 to 50 reflections on each of the 6 projects. And in total, this becomes between 180 and 300 reflections on real-life corporate entrepreneurship, with causation-based data where a cause can be connected to an effect based on what actually happened in real life. Here's an example of a couple of research questions that we've been working with in the area of entrepreneurial sales in corporate entrepreneurship. We've been looking at what are the opportunities and challenges of interacting with external stakeholders when you work with early stage corporate innovation. In 2018, we looked at how corporate entrepreneurs obtain ambassadors who will help them sell their innovation, internally as well as externally. And up until this year, we looked at how to plan and build deep and strong relationships that foster and benefit corporate entrepreneurship projects. Also internally within the corporate organization and externally outside the organization. And these are key questions that we are looking for answers to when it comes to corporate entrepreneurship. If we go back to this slide, showing causes and effects and different types of events that can lead to different types of effects. Here we can see how the research questions around sales could be used in the same way here. So the events that we are investigating here could be, for example, to obtain an internal ambassador using one particular method. And then the next task could be to obtain an internal ambassador using another method, and also a third method over here. And then we need to think about, okay, so what would be indicators of success or failure in these endeavors here, over here? And what would be the long-term effect? And then we would try to capture this with LoopMe. Looking at some of the other research questions, we could have, for example, the task could be to interact with an external stakeholder. And then we could have indicators of success or failure around this activity to see what works, when, and why. The same thing here with the relationship research question. The task could be to build a deep and strong relationship. And then students would reflect upon how this went and try to tag their experiences with different kinds of indicators of success or failure. This is the work that we have ahead of us now, short term, to configure LoopMe so that we can really capture causation in corporate entrepreneurship. Part 3. What results do we expect to get from this in the end? First of all, what we're going to get here is a data file that contains all reflections in one single Excel file. And each of those reflections is going to be connected to an action-oriented, real-life corporate entrepreneurship activity. And it's also going to have an emotional level and a number of chosen tags. All this data can then be sorted based on which research question we've been looking at, depending on which task we've been looking at, depending on which team we are following or which corporation we're looking at, or any other parameter you may want to look at. So this becomes then a massive amount of qualitative and quantitative data that we can analyze in Excel, or of course in other software packages. And what will this give us? Well, we will have rigorously collected empirical data on 5 key issues for corporate entrepreneurs. This data will be longitudinal. It will be generated in action with a very high validity and reliability. And it will be highly quantifiable qualitative data. So it's going to be quite easy to analyze this data. So what benefits does this give us? Well, first of all, the reflections themselves, they are done in action. So students will learn a lot only by reflecting, but also by reading others' reflections, they will learn a lot. We will also have comparable data from multiple cases, which makes cross-case comparisons much easier. And also, the conclusions and the recommendations that the students will come up with will be more trustworthy because we will have data to back up any conclusions. And more long-term, as number of observations grow, we will get an increased possibility to generalize our findings. And over the years, if we continue with this year by year, we will have an increasingly big data set, and that will long-term become a unique database. Also, later years students could use all this data to look at causation and what works in corporate entrepreneurship, why, and in what context. There are, of course, a number of variation factors that will determine how well it's going to work. The first question is, will all students reflect on all research questions? We can, of course, force our students to use this method, but we cannot force them to do high-quality research. So the class will have to decide upon which level of ambition that they want to have on this and the level of compliance to agreed upon plans. And we will see what happens. Next question is, will the reflections be deep enough? Because deep reflection is difficult. It takes time, it takes practice, and it takes effort. But if you manage to get deeper reflection, you will also get higher quality data. Then we have some other aspects to consider. Do we all want to see each other's reflections immediately? As you saw before, you can have a flat group in LoopMe. And then every reflection from everyone will become immediately visible, and you can comment in real time, which is also data. Comments are also data. But this could be perceived as spam and maybe it's too much data. So basically it's up to the students to choose here. Another question is, will our students be able to or willing to come up with interesting causation hypotheses? And here it's about thinking hard and deep about which cause that will lead to which effect. And this is not an easy thing. Also, we in the faculty will have to think about how to design the study using LoopMe. And of course, the more work you spend up front, the more interesting result you will get. But will we be able to prioritize this enough in the early stage? That's a question we don't know the answer to yet. Another factor is, will the data actually be longitudinal, or will our students procrastinate? The best data is of course generated in action, but it is possible to save the study by doing late reflections. But we can also set deadlines so that we get this longitudinal data. It's again a choice for our students. To summarize a little bit, here's the timeline that we're looking at here. We have the second semester coming up here, the autumn, starting up in September 2019. And we need to spend some time to articulate research questions and to configure LoopMe so that we can do a good study. And I think that it's realistic maybe to start collecting data around November, maybe even October, but we'll see what happens. And then when we get into the spring, maybe around March, April, we will have collected data for 6 months. So then hopefully in early April, we're going to have between 180 and 300 reflections generated. And by June next year, then we're going to have all data analyzed and presented to faculty and to corporations. And that's going to be very, very interesting. So we're looking at a pretty interesting study that's going to be conducted here. And I'm absolutely going to come back and report on how it went. For the students, the results are going to be written down in master thesis reports. And I can tell you, this is not the ordinary master thesis report. This is a bit more complex structure. But we've been working with this structure for a number of years now, and we have pretty good experiences of this structure. And this is what a master thesis report looks like. We have a master thesis reports of about 150 to 200 pages. That's the usual size. First of all comes a summarizing kappa, telling the reader basically what is it we're going to find here. Then we have 2 studies that are unrelated to this scientific social media LoopMe method, so I will not go much into them right now. Then comes 5, you could say, mini articles. Each of these articles goes through one of the 5 perspectives in a 15 to 20 pages long report. And then comes the cross-case analysis of one of the 5 research questions, which is much deeper and goes across all of the cases, all of the 6 companies that have been part of this study. And then we have some appendices in the bottom. If we go back and look at each of those mini articles around one research question, here we see the structure of each and every one of those reports. It starts here with some introduction, with the literature and theory and some methodology. And this part is written by a dedicated RQ team. The team setup here is different from the team setup for the projects. And then the text that is produced by this team is reused by all other students in the class. And they embed this text into their respective master thesis reports. Of course, this means that we need to make authorship very, very explicit, so that nobody thinks that all of this was written by the person that has his or her name on this master thesis report. Then we have the second part of each of these RQ study reports, where we have the findings, where basically the reflections are disclosed and how it went is disclosed. And then we have an analysis and discussion and some implications around this. And then we have some conclusions. So what we have here is basically the part that is written by the author of this master thesis report. And the data is primarily the data from the own project that is being analyzed here. But something new here that hasn't been like this in previous years is actually that now it's going to be much easier for everyone to access data from other teams. So it could be possible to have also cross-case analysis here, which was impossible before because it was so complex just to analyze one corporation and what had been going on in that. But that could change for this year. We will see what happens. All right. So that's what the structure on the master thesis is going to look like. And I'm very excited to see how this is going to turn out. All right. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation about collecting scientific data with LoopMe. I'm going to come back with another video to tell you how it all went. Okay, bye-bye.